Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our special event, which is entitled Exploring EU Values, Solidarity and Funding. My name is Deirdre, and I'm going to kick off this morning's meeting. We are in collaboration today with our colleagues in Lergas, which is the Managing Authority for the Erasmus Plus programme, and also for the European Solidarity Corps. And also here at the Wheel, we're the national contact point for another EU programme called Europe for Citizens. So together, the three of us are going to bring to you some ideas and some stimulation, hopefully, in the area of values, solidarity, and the funding that goes along with it. So as I said, my name is Deirdre. I am the EU Programmes Manager here at the Wheel. You're welcome to contact me with all of your queries around accessing EU funding for civil society organisations. My co-facilitators today are going to be Suzanne Kavanagh, who is Senior Client Services Officer at Lergas, in particular overseeing the European Solidarity Corps area of their work. And also we have online, we have Pia Janning. So Pia is their Senior Policy and Strategic Alliances Officer, and she's going to talk a little bit about policy. In terms of the agenda, the agenda today is going to be generally going between 10 and half 11. We're going to include breakout rooms. We're going to do some discussion on what is policy, what is the EU's policy, and then some case studies from two organisations that have benefited from EU funding. Those will be Aidan McLaughlin and Laura Neeson. But for now, I'm just going to pass over to my colleague, Pia from Lergas, and Pia is going to start with some ideas and stimulation around the whole area of policy. Thanks, Pia.
Hi everyone, you're very welcome. And I was just looking at the chat, and it's amazing to see so many people from so many different areas. I think we have an amazing geographic spread from Donegal to Sligo to Carlow to Canada and Italy. So I'm feeling very globally connected today. It's brilliant. So you're all very welcome. And I wanted to just kick off the discussion this morning with a little bit of, I suppose, a warm up, I guess, getting our brains working and thinking a little bit about the whole area of policy, because a lot of what we do in Lergas and also in the Wheel is trying to connect people to policy and looking at how the projects that we fund can help people connect and influence policy more. So I guess one of the things that we find a lot is that sometimes people feel that, you know, they're not really connected to policy on a day-to-day basis. What they do isn't very relevant to policy. Some people obviously are very connected to policy, but a lot of the time we feel that, you know, people don't feel that sometimes. So this is really just to kind of guide you through it and to start thinking about maybe how your work connects to policy, and then later on you'll see how people have used the funding programs to really influence and try and shape policy. So I guess I just framed a short presentation with, you know, the what, the why and the how of policy. So if we just go back one slide to, what is policy? So policy is, I guess, the set of values and objectives that guide the work of organisations and bodies. And any of us that are working in an organisation or any kind of representative body, we're all guided by policy, even just at an organisational level. But I guess broadly speaking, you know, we can look at policy at lots of different levels. So be that, you know, at our own organisational level, at a local level, at a national level, of course, and then also at an international and European level. And it's, of course, the European level that we're very much interested in when it comes to European funding programs. So if we look at the why then, so why is policy important? So I guess what we would say is why it's important is if there's four buzzwords there that I've just put up on the screen, which are plans, priorities, commitment, and really importantly, if you're a civil society organisation, accountability. So policy tells us what organisations and bodies plan to achieve and how they're going to be guided in their work. So often it can really show us kind of a roadmap, I guess, of what organisations or the government or the European Union are hoping to achieve in certain areas. So, for example, government policy tells us what the government's priorities are and what it plans to accomplish. And it sets out the commitments that it's making on a range of different issues. And obviously this is really pertinent at the moment when we look at the formation of government and looking at, you know, what the programme for government is going to contain and the policies that are going to come out of that as well over the next number of years. So just a couple of areas that I've highlighted there, obviously just some examples are, you know, in education and training, employment, mental health, the rights of people with disabilities, migration, and so forth. And I saw even just from the chat box that those who are here with us today represent lots of different areas. So you're going to be most familiar probably with your own area of interest that you're working in. And really importantly, like I said, policy is a tool to ensure accountability. So if we have a policy on something, then we can really hold the government to account for that, because it really shows us a roadmap of what the government has committed to achieving. So if we just move on then. So that big question of how does my work link to policy, and that's something, you know, like I mentioned earlier, that people sometimes struggle with. So what I've just done here very broadly, one of the areas that we work in Lergus is youth work. So we would fund projects in the youth field, but this is really just an illustrative example, but I've used youth work as an example. So I've posed 4 questions there, and this is something that you guys might even start thinking about a little bit to shape your thoughts around how you can connect more to policy. So one is, you know, what is your organization's main area of work? What is your organization trying to achieve? What policy exists in this area? So that could be at a national, at a European, at an international level, or even at a local level. And is your work aligned with, or is it influencing or helping to achieve policy objectives? So they're just some questions that even, you know, you might want to jot down, and you can even do a little bit of brainstorming in your own time around that. So the example, like I've said, that I've given is around youth work. So if we ask that question, you know, of what is your organization's main area of work, the youth work, what's your organization trying to achieve? It's trying to achieve, for argument's sake, active citizenship and participation of young people. And then we can look at what are the policies that exist in that area. So just from a national and European perspective, we've Better Outcomes, Brighter Futures, the National Youth Strategy that exists at a national level. And then at an EU level, we have the EU Youth Strategy, the European Youth Goals, and then obviously at an international level, we have the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. And all of these policies specifically mention active citizenship and participation of young people. So if that's your objective within your organization, then you're very much connected to policy at lots of different levels. And in terms of if your work is influencing those policies, well, if your organization is enabling active citizenship and participation of young people, then you are aligned with those policy objectives and you are helping to achieve them. So I hope that that kind of whistle-stop tour has kind of, I suppose, woken people up this morning and got you energized, and we'll have an opportunity to come back to this a little bit more later on. So I'm just going to hand back over to Dee now, and I'll talk to you a little bit later. Thanks a million.
Well, thanks, Pia. So considering policy then, and Pia's example around youth work, a youth organisation, say, that is aligning its own work to policy areas nationally and in fact at a European level, we thought that today would be a good idea to think a little bit more about the EU and its values base and indeed its policy framework, because rather than chasing funding and deciding to go for funding calls and to do an application against a deadline, we think it's important to consider first what are the values of the EU and what are our own organisation's values, what's the policy of the EU and how does that fit with our own objectives. So let me go forward. So as you know, this is the European Union. I hate to be giving like a fourth year, a transition year presentation here, but essentially we've got 27 member states. But what is it that they are all, what values are they aligned and have in common? So the values base of the EU and what it was in fact formed around, and what is it that unites all member states are respect for human dignity and human rights, freedom, democracy, equality, and the rule of law. So my reason for outlining those values really is that we suddenly say, many of our organisations, that's very much in line with what we do. Many of us are working in the areas of inclusion or combating, abuses of the human rights, etc. So reminding ourselves what is the values base is just so important because it brings around that whole issue of solidarity. And what you find in European programs is that we are being encouraged to find solidarity with other partners and other people from other countries. So let me move on then to EU policy. So the Europe 2020 is the name of the policy framework that the European Commission and the European Union has been working against between 2014 to 2020. So the targets, there have been targets set, the way we make our own strategic plan with goals and objectives. The European Union's objectives have been centered around employment, research and development, climate change, education, poverty and social exclusion. So I just leave them there for a second. And again, you might see places where your own organization's work is aligned. But now that was up until 2020. So actually that framework is coming to completion. And as you may know from reading the news and that, is that the new EU budget is currently being discussed greatly. And with COVID, of course, certain areas are being reduced and others increased in order to tackle that crisis. But what are the EU priority areas that EU leaders have decided to focus on between 2021 and 2027? So I just wanted to highlight these for everyone because, again, you may see synergies with your own work. Well, the areas of focus will be migration, climate change again, defense and security, interesting, research and innovation again, of course, and citizens engagement. So for organizations who are members of the Wheel, many of us are working in this engagement area. And what the European Union wants to see is bringing citizens closer to understanding the Union and its value. So then we can move now to explaining to you some of the European programs that exist. So I could sit here all day going through over 30 EU programs, but today we're focusing on 3 for your benefit. They are the European Solidarity Corps, Erasmus Plus, and Europe for Citizens. So we wish to just isolate these 3 programs today and help you see if, having understood the policy framework and the values base and these programs, if there's something there for you in your organization. So I'm actually going to hand over to Suzanne from Lergas, and she's going to talk us through the European Solidarity Corps, which she represents.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Thanks, Dave, for that. I have the lucky position and privilege to actually talk about how you can link everything that we've talked about in terms of policy and guidelines and legislation and all that kind of stuff to actually your practice. So one of the examples there is the European Solidarity Corps. So I've been involved with the move from the European voluntary service, which was under Erasmus Plus, into the European Solidarity Corps for the last nearly 2 years now. And it's basically about making a change. So your community organizations or civil society organizations or anyone that's involved in making change or impact, this program is for you. Yeah. So, like I said, this is a standalone program. It's running completely separate from the Erasmus Plus program. So we've evolved from the European voluntary service, which was about young people and their personal development and bringing them on a journey of self-development, to now recognizing that actually these young people are now connecting with organizations and being involved and having taking part in making changes in communities. So the focus now is actually looking at these organizations that are involved in what we call solidarity related topics. So it's all of the stuff that Dee and Pia covered in policy, but actually in practice. So things like inclusion, citizenship and democratic participation, disaster prevention and recovery, environment and natural protection, health and well-being, education and training, reception and integration of refugees and migrants, and many, many more. And it's about bringing those young people to these organizations at the community level, engaging them in real active citizenship, like where they're really part of the change, and creating this idea of solidarity so that these young people recognize that there's certain marginalized groups in the community who need support, or there's issues in communities that need support, and bringing that back and creating this idea of empathy and action. So developing that empathy and bringing it back then to their own countries. So the European Solidarity Corps is actually an umbrella term. It actually is a program with 2 strands. It's an occupational strand and a volunteering strand. So they're the two funding streams. In order for organizations to be involved, they have to have a quality label. A quality label then is your entry ticket into the program. It means that you meet a quality standard, so that you are able to provide the right treatment and conditions for the young people, that you're involved in activities that are solidarity related, and that you're also aligning to the mission and principles of the Solidarity Corps. So that's the first step in. The occupational strand then is a job. So a job is a job. So as long as it's in a solidarity related area, there's funding for an employee. And then a traineeship then is a learning-based work placement. So it's based on, we don't have traineeships in Ireland, but it's based on a quality framework that was agreed across the 27 member states in 2014. And we've implemented some of it in Ireland, but this program is based on that framework. And it's about creating learning opportunities that are not connected to the national curriculum, but they build on skills and competencies to support the young people into employment. The other focus of the European Solidarity Corps is that actually young people can access and move on to sustainable employment. So that under the occupational strand, that's 20% of the funding that we have available. And then the other 80% then is under the volunteering strand. So I'm just going to concentrate on two of these today. So one is solidarity projects. So solidarity projects are where young people themselves, they identify an issue in their community. They come together as a minimum group of 5 people. They work together for up to a year to address those issues in lots of different ways. And they can do that as part of the program. Then we have the volunteering individuals and teams. That's where a lot of our organizations are involved. That's where most of our funding goes. So this is where young people from all over Europe come and they participate in activities, again, related to all of those areas that are for up to a year. And then also you can have a group of young people, up to 40 young people in a team, come and do a very impactful project for a short amount of time. They also, under the European Solidarity Corps, can also be in-country activities. So you can volunteer, you can receive volunteers, Irish volunteers from Ireland into your organisation. I think in terms of the current situation, it's a good thing to note that there is funding available for the in-country stuff as well. So what is funded? So the travel is funded. You also, as an organisation, get organisation support. That's a day-to-day helping you to run the project. For young people who have barriers or obstacles in the way for their participation, there's inclusion support. The volunteers get pocket money. There's linguistic support, which is an online linguistic support. There's insurance that covers on top of the European Health Insurance Card. There's also exceptional costs, and that's anything that stops the project from happening, and complementary activity costs. So anything that you would like to do to strengthen the impact of your project, you can apply for as a complementary activity cost. So I've chosen 2 examples here today just to run through very quickly. So one is Crooked House. They had a project in 2019 called Drama for Social Change. They received a grant of €51,234. They're an organisation based in Kildare. They're a youth theatre, and they work with a lot of marginalised young people and early school leavers. And this particular project was to address issues of high unemployment across EU countries and the lack of recognition of theatre as a tool for non-formal learning in the various education systems across Europe. So you can see there where they're building the solidarity, they're identifying issues, and they're working then together to address that. And then the other one I chose was Involve, and Involve are a project based in Meath. They work with young people from the travelling community. They applied to host an in-country volunteer. They received a grant of €15,659. And they work to promote greater awareness of traveller culture to address discrimination and inclusion. So you can see like the variety and the vast opportunities actually available under the programme for both young people and the organisations. So that's it. That was a whistle-stop tour as well of the European Solidarity Corps, but we'll show you at the end then as well where some next steps you can go. So now I'm going to pass over to my colleague Pia, who is going to go through the Erasmus Plus programme. Thanks a million, everybody.
Suzanne, hi again, everyone. So I'm just going to give you a really broad overview of the Erasmus Plus programme. I think a lot of the time when people hear Erasmus, they here, you know, they think about the traditional kind of view of that we have of Erasmus, of, you know, doing your semester abroad in college. But the Erasmus Plus program is much, much broader than that, and hopefully I can give you kind of a flavour of what's possible today. So Erasmus Plus is the 7-year EU funding program that supports education, training, youth and sports in Europe. And the program runs from 2014 until the end of 2020. So this comes with a health warning. There will be a new program next year, but broadly the structures of the new program will be the same. There'll be some little changes, but this will give you a good sense anyway of how the programs work. So in terms of how the Erasmus Plus program is structured, there are, broadly speaking, 3 key actions: key action 1, 2, and 3. And the different key actions focus on different things. So the first key action is all about mobility of individuals. So it promotes or it supports projects that involve kind of exchanges, study visits, job shadowing, training in another country. So this can take place in all sorts of different fields. So for example, the youth field, adult education field, vocational education and training, and even within that, that can be really broad, and schools as well, of course. Key action 2 then, these are generally much bigger projects that often take place over the course of like 2 to 3 years, and often involve a partnership of a number of different countries. And these projects are for organizations that want to collaborate in order to share experiences, to exchange ideas, or develop new practices in their work. So what we would often see with these types of projects would be that organizations would collaborate over a long period of time, and they would have outputs from their projects, such as, for example, often we would say training resources that are developed, or reports, or even websites, apps, lots of different forms that the kind of tools or the outputs of a project can take. And then key action 3, which is the key action that I manage in Lergas, these are projects that it's called Support for Policy Reform. And they're projects that empower young people to take part in decision-making processes, and give young people a voice in decisions that affect their lives. This particular stream of funding only applies in the youth field, but in saying that, you know, the types of projects that we fund under this stream, it doesn't necessarily have to be a youth work organization, as long as it's an organization that engages with young people and works with young people in non-formal ways. So just to give you a sense of, I'm not going to get into the budgets today, but just to give you a sense of the kind of funding that's available. So key action 1 projects are normally, the funding lines are based on kind of travel bans, organizational support, course fees if somebody wants to attend a course, and so forth. So it really depends on the nature of the project. Key action 2 projects, then the maximum amount of funding that's available is €450,000, and that would be for a 3-year project. But then depending on the length of your project, obviously the funding that's available will vary. And key action 3 projects, which are traditionally slightly smaller projects, the maximum amount of funding that's available there would be €50,000. And Laura, who's going to present later, is actually a recipient of key action 3 funding, so you'll get a much better sense of what's possible as well when she speaks later. So just to give you an idea then, I've just picked out 3 case studies, because I know that the program can sometimes be a little bit overwhelming for people, and it's hard to kind of get your head around it sometimes and see what's actually available. So I've picked out three projects that all received funding for different key actions. So the first one was Galway Technical Institute, and they received funding under key action 1, which is around mobility. And they received their funding in the area of vocational education and training. And what's really interesting about this project, that they really integrated the European funding into the way that they do their work. So you can see that they started off in 2009 under the predecessor of Erasmus Plus, actually, with a project where they received €24,000. And with that, they sent 6 participants abroad on learner placements. And these learners were working or were doing qualifications in the area of fashion, business, art, and sport. So you can see that, you know, it's really, really broad range there. And between 2009 and 2014, Galway Technical Institute actually massively increased the number of learners that were engaged in Erasmus+. So in 2014, they received a grant of 534,000, up from 24,000. So I thought that was quite impressive. And they funded 200 learner placements. So the young people had the opportunity to go abroad to work in different companies, to work on different projects. And usually the work placements are kind of between 2 and 4 weeks. And as you can see here, they partnered with 4 countries, Scotland, Poland, Spain, and Finland. So that's just kind of an idea of what's possible under Key Action 1. Obviously, it's specific to the vocational education and training side, this particular example. Key Action 2 then, so this is an example from the adult education field. And it was a project with Smashing Times Theatre, and the project was called Drama for Change. And they partnered with Spain, the Netherlands, Germany, and Bulgaria. And it was a 3-year project where they developed a training curriculum for adult educators to use creative processes to promote inclusion, gender equality, and to combat racism. And as I was saying earlier, the Key Action 2 projects often have more significant outputs at the end. And one of the outputs from this project was that they developed a resource toolbox for adult educators. So the project involved 75 trainers and 25 stakeholders who piloted the resource. And the funding that was awarded to this particular project was over 306,000 euros, almost 307,000 euros. So again, quite a substantial grant, but also for quite a substantial project. And then the last example that I have here under Key Action 3 was that this project was funded under Key Action 3 for the Irish Refugee Council. It's a project called Youth Speak. And it was a shorter project, 10 months, and involved the Irish Refugee Council and the European Youth Migration Forum. And the focus of the project was to engage young people who had experience, either were still living in direct provision or had at one point lived in direct provision, to engage them in a consultation process around Ireland on their experiences. So the Irish Refugee Council travelled around Ireland, met with young people living in the various different direct provision centres or in the areas around there, and facilitated discussions also with decision makers and policy makers. So they had a roundtable consultation at the end where the young people had the opportunity to feed back their experiences directly to representatives from the Department of Justice. So you can see there a really broad range of projects. I hope it's given you a sense and maybe some inspiration and maybe some ideas are already percolating in your minds about what's possible under the programme. So at this stage now, I'm just going to hand back to Dee, who's going to talk about the Europe for Citizens programme. Thanks a million.
Thanks, Pia. Thank you so much for going through Erasmus Plus, and also Suzanne going through the European Solidarity Corps. I'm going to talk about Europe for Citizens, and what you might see is that there are crossovers and synergies between the 3 programs. Many organisations that benefit from each can benefit from each other's programs, so that's why we're collaborating today. So Europe for Citizens is an EU programme. It focuses on 2 key areas. Firstly is reflecting on why the EU was founded. So what were the events in the lead up to the founding of the European Union in terms of recovery from World War II, recovery from key events such as the Holocaust, and why we need to promote peace, and why we need to come together to promote European citizenship. And the second area is around promoting democratic engagement, so really encouraging citizenship and active citizenship and participation, particularly in the European realm. So today I just wanted to talk a little bit around Strand 2, because with these programs we could go through details, but the second part of the program is the democratic engagement and civic engagement area. The objective of Europe for Citizens in this regard is to develop citizens' understanding of EU policy-making process and promote opportunities for engagement and volunteering. So many of us already work in this area. We may work with key groups that we support them to be active citizens, and real things that really are of interest to the evaluators and the leaders of the Europe for Citizens programme are things like volunteering and intercultural engagement and promoting diversity. So the priorities of the programme this year, because every year there are different priorities, this year in 2020, the main priorities around which projects have been encouraged to align with are: 1, debating the future of Europe. So what is the future of the European Union? 2, challenging Euroscepticism and the rise of populism in the EU. 3, promoting solidarity in crisis. And this word solidarity comes up again and again, but what is it that we have in common? Despite our borders, despite our different cultures, what do we have in common? And the last one is combating the stigmatization of migrants and combating the stigmatization of minority groups. So even in this list of 4 key areas, you can probably see areas that your organization could do projects on. Now, much like Pia, I'm coming to this presentation with a health warning. Our program finishes this year in 2020. However, a brand new program called Citizens, Equality, Rights and Values will be launched next year. And many of these teams will emerge and there'll be lots of opportunities. In fact, there'll be a bigger budget, so stay tuned for that. But I just wanted to highlight the key deadlines, the application funding deadlines right now that I'm working around and encouraging applications against are civil society projects for the 1st of September. And those projects must include partners from other EU member states. So you have to enter into partnership in order to apply. Town twinning, which is a much smaller grant up to €25,000, where you partner with another town, and networks of towns up to €150,000. That particular strand is probably best suited to local authorities. All of this detail and information is available on a key website. The Irish website is europeforcitizens.ie. So rather than confusing you and going into too much detail around how to apply, I just want to give you some inspiration, because here are some Irish organisations you may know, and they have availed of Europe for Citizens funding. The first one would be the Dublin City Volunteer Centre. They did a project called Volunteering as a Tool to Strengthen EU Values. And in their consortium, there were 4 partners, but the Dublin City Volunteer Centre was the key lead coordinator. So they wrote the application and they managed the project, which was to the value of just under €130,000. But obviously that funding is divided amongst the 4 partners. The next one is Altogether Dignity, a much smaller project. And their project was called Our Voices. And it was about bringing people, extremely disadvantaged people, to learn more about EU policy making and to bring their case and their needs and their requests to EU policymakers. In fact, a group of people from Spain, Poland and Dublin actually all travelled to the European Parliament at the end of that project to give a presentation to European parliamentarians. That was just under €60,000. The next project I'd like to highlight is just about to start. It hasn't started yet, but it was just recently funded for Age and Opportunity. And their project is called Touchstone for Europe, which is about organising older people's councils. So again, it's about opinion gathering and allowing people to have their voices heard around key issues that matter to them. And there's 4 people in that consortium, almost €150,000. And the last one is a few years ago. This was the Ballymun Job Centre, which was a project with 6 partners which analysed the public participation networks, the PPNs that we have, and compared and contrasted that format with other similar local participatory methodologies and processes in Poland and other countries, and that was €150,000. So I just wanted to highlight those civil society projects, and that deadline, as I said, is the 1st of September. So do let me know if you're looking to join a consortium or to lead a project. At this point, we're actually going to take a break to listen to some beneficiaries. Suzanne, would you like to introduce Aideen for me?
Yeah, no problem. Sorry.
Thanks, Mil.
Yeah, so I suppose it's great and it's fantastic to listen to us in terms of the technical support, and I'm sure the Wheel and definitely Lurgus are here to support you in your application. But I suppose it's really nice then to hear the actual work. So we have 2 beneficiaries here with us this morning, Aideen McLaughlin from the Good Energies Alliance and Laura Neeson from the Rediscovery Centre. So I'm just going to first hand over to Aideen, who's going to share her screen and present to you this morning her experience of what would have been EVS and then moving into the European Solidarity Corps. Thanks, Aideen.
Thank you, Suzanne, and good morning, everybody. My name is Aideen McLaughlin. I am I'm CEO of Good Energies Alliance Ireland, a small NGO in Leitrim. And we have been participants in, first of all, Youth in Action, then in EVS, and now in European Solidarity Corps since 2012. And it has been a vital part of our operation that I would like to share with you. So I'm going to share the screen now, and hopefully you will be able to see my presentation. Yes, it is coming. There we are. So what I'm going to talk about is the link between EU projects, EU policy, and the Irish campaign against fracking. For those of you that are not familiar with the term fracking, it is an extremely destructive way of extracting gas or oil from rocks using explosive methods to break up rock underground, using all sorts of chemicals and actually having a huge potential to affect the environment locally. And there was a project to start fracking in where we are, which is in the northwest of Ireland in Leitrim, all around Lough Allen, a very beautiful area. And there was a proposal between our area and north of the border to drill 3,000 wells. So we campaigned for 6 years and we actually did it. We were at the, Good Energies was at the forefront of the campaign against fracking right from the start, a small unknown NGO from Leitrim, and we influenced the decision of the government to pass a new law banning fracking in Ireland. Now, how did we do that? We had from the start a secret weapon, EVS volunteers. And we chose volunteers who were interested in campaigning and in social media. And it was amazing how few opportunities there are for volunteers to work in something that involves campaigning and involves really looking at the policies around climate change and the environment. We attracted amazing young people, and they created websites, Facebook pages, went into social media big time. Some of them were into graphics, they made posters and banners. They were involved in every way in our project, and without them, we would have been struggling to do what we did, quite really. And this was very much a focus on two priorities now. One was, of course, climate change and energy sustainability, and the other was citizenship and democratic participation, because they certainly did get involved in those areas and went from very local action to national action, where we were actually not only demonstrating outside government buildings, but making presentations to the national representatives, our TDs, inside the building. And we let them work on their own initiative a lot of the time, although they did need guidance, because every country has its own political system. And of course, they had to negotiate their way through the, quagmire, I suppose you could call it, of Irish politics. But we actually built up relationships with the people, with the decision makers in the country, whether that was with local members of political parties, their representatives, the local authorities, and then going towards the national government, the national representatives, the ministers even, and of course, eventually the decision of the government itself. So naturally enough, they researched the issues, they learned about the Irish political system, and they certainly learned about the power of active citizenship. So in that way, we were very closely aligned to policy formation and actually to the way in which decisions are made and changed. Here on the left, we have a photo of 3 of our volunteers at the time. And that was during a meeting where we targeted the candidates for the local elections to actually vote Ireland frack-free. And these signs, of course, were made by the volunteers. The girl in the middle there, Olga, she was absolutely marvelous. She's ended up in New Zealand, actually. She's working for an architectural firm, which doesn't surprise us. The girl on the right went from our project to do a PhD in something, and Cedric is working in one of the French radio stations. So from our project, with the experience they got, they certainly progressed, and we keep in touch with all of them, of course. On the right-hand side, the photo is of some of our more serious actions, and this one was a debate we had with the national representatives in government buildings. And those of you from Ireland probably recognise the guy in the middle there, Eamon Ryan. He is the leader of the Green Party that is forming the new government at the moment, or hoping to form it. So what kind of strategies did we use? You're talking about a mixture of strategies here. We obviously try to raise awareness through agitation, in other words, having demonstrations, having meetings, putting out social media, all of that, trying to get people involved. And that was very important. We also focused on education, actually making presentations to community groups all over the country, to local authorities, you name it, anybody that was willing to listen to us. We traveled and we presented, and always by our sides were the EVS volunteers. Not all of them all the time, but certainly they were there in the thick of it all. Communication was more or less totally managed by them. And if you look at our website, you will see some of the work that has been done. They are really, if you give young people the chance to shine, they do. They are radiant. Advocacy was a very important aspect of our campaigns, and there the volunteers learned, how do you write to public representatives? How do you speak to them? What is the culture of Ireland, and also the political system? And I think this is a very worthwhile way of using these volunteers, not so much using them, but of engaging them in citizenship, and getting them to learn about what our system, appreciating it, and then when they go back to their own countries, they can continue the work of trying to influence decision making. And of course, networking. We've had a huge, we've a big network of groups and individuals around Ireland, but also with our partnerships with the sending organisations. They have been extremely supportive of our work, and are all the time looking for people that have the potential to come and work with us. And we also have great support from organisations in the United States, because their fracking is widely used and it is causing dreadful economic impacts for local communities. So they were really active with our campaign, and in fact, we became great friends with some of the campaigners there. But if you, with campaigns, it is very important to know exactly what you want, to make that clear, and to keep saying it, so that your issue is widely understood. You yourselves, as organizations, are credible, and you become influential then. And the really important thing is to use the system to get what you want. So what we did was, starting from the local community, nobody knew what the issue was about, and they had to be brought forward, and the capacity raised in the local communities to actually participate in the campaign and to be effective. And from the local community, we moved to the local authorities. We made presentations to them. We got involved in their plans for local development plans, climate plans, all of these sort of things. We actually kept on communicating. And then from there, we had to move to national awareness. And that was a huge issue, a huge problem, because here we were in the Northwest, in Leitrim of all places, because everybody, they couldn't believe that there could be anything coming out of Leitrim except rushes, really. But anyway, we got there, and it was some of the impact that we made was because of our networks with European and US organizations, because people who were well known started to come to Ireland to speak on our behalf. And one of the most famous ones was Mark Ruffalo, who was the Hulk. And he actually put in a statement supporting our campaign, which did make national headlines, and that was great for our campaign. So you have to use any weapon that you have, use it. From the national awareness, then the national politicians became more involved with the campaign, more understanding of where we were coming from, trying to preserve the rural landscape and the rural culture of the area that we live in Ireland. And eventually then, of course, we managed to get the government to pass the law to ban fracking. It was a great day altogether. So now, that was in 2017. And since then, we have turned our attention far more to climate change and to lowering of emissions. Our work is changing. We're now supported by the European Solidarity Corps. Here are 4 of our volunteers. They've just finished their project now. We have them from France, from Italy, from Romania, and from Belarus at the moment. But we take volunteers from all countries. We do try to include volunteers from Eastern Europe and from the partner countries, because we find they bring a richness to our projects that otherwise we wouldn't have. And we would be very supportive of any other organization that wants to use the Solidarity Corps to support their own environmental campaigns. It is a hidden resource. It's not used enough in Ireland, and I would really support anyone who wants to do it. They can just contact us in Leitrim, and we would be delighted to give them a hand. So thank you all very much indeed.
Thanks a million, Aidan. That was brilliant. Yeah, so many years experience, Aidan, of all these volunteers going through the
yes, indeed.
Now I'm just going to hand you over to Laura Neeson from the Rediscovery Centre, and she's going to present her.
Oh, that was fine.
Her project. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks very much, Suzanne, and thanks, Aidan. That was very interesting. If you just skip on to the next slide there. As we said, I work with the Rediscovery Centre, which, in case you might know it, is the Irish Centre for the Circular Economy. And basically the circular economy very much looks into resource efficiency, designing out waste, reusing and repairing items so they are extending their lifetime and their usage. And we're up in Ballymun in Dublin, and we have several parts to our work. We have a few reuse social enterprises that were born out of Ballymun Regeneration. So in the social enterprises, we reuse and repair furniture, textiles, bicycles, and paint. But because they're social enterprises, we also offer traineeships, we offer community employment. We have a visitor center with an on-site cafe and an eco store. And we also have a large education department that provides education for the environment and science. The part that is most relevant for today, though, is we also have a research and policy team, which I am part of. And as part of our policy work, we work on environmental policy in Ireland and internationally, and we are involved in the development of the new waste action plan for circular economy in Ireland, and we also work with the Department for Communications, Climate Action and Environment on their circular economy strategy that is forthcoming. And we realized that while there is a lot of development on the Irish side for circular economy policy, and in Europe, especially with the Green Deal and the Circular Economy Action Plan, the policy process didn't really include the youth perspective. So we saw all the school strikes for climate, Fridays for Future, but we didn't really see that much input into the policy that was being developed. So what we decided was we wanted to address that. We wanted to have a project where we can get in young people to voice their opinions, to talk about what matters to them, because it will affect their future. what is decided now. And we were lucky enough to partner with the National Youth Council on this project, as well as with Young Voices. And Young Voices is a project that is connected to the EU Youth Dialogue, and it enables young people to provide feedback into this European Youth Dialogue on issues of relevance. It's long-term, around 18 months, so it really gives the young people the opportunity to learn how to do advocacy, but also to get involved, which was brilliant for us because we could take this dialogue from the very local level to the national and then to the European through Young Voices as well. It wasn't the youth dialogue on Irish circular economy wasn't the first Erasmus Plus project we'd ever done. We had worked on Key Actions 2 before, and that included exchanges of young people for innovation, for reuse and circular economy. But this was the first time we worked on a Key Action 3, so worked on something with policy reform, support for policy reform. And I just wanted to give you a bit of insight into how we felt the application process went, because we were surprised at how smooth it was. It was very comprehensive, very swift moving, which is important in policy specifically, because as I said, we were working in the policy consultation with the government on the new waste action plan and on their circular economy plan. And we applied in October last year. We got the confirmation in December and we started in January. So it was a very swift moving process, which is incredibly helpful if you're working on something as relevant and maybe urgent as policy that is currently under development. It was meant to be a 5-month project, so it would have started in January and finished in May. Now, obviously, we're all aware of the current situation. So because of COVID, we have now received an extension. We will hopefully be able to still have the policy dialogue, the final plenary event in person. If that isn't possible, we are currently looking at an online version, so we'll have to see how that works. But the final dialogue, we really wanted to have it youth-led. So it was important because the young people are the ones that are talking to the policymakers and influencing policy. We wanted to ensure that they have the training. We provided training on what the circular economy is, what current European policy is doing, what current national policy is doing. And we also provided training on inclusiveness and reflexivity, and trying to provide training to the steering committee, which I will talk about now, about how to include all participants. And that is the crux of our youth-led project planning. So if you want to just switch to the next slide there. Thank you. We had a steering committee of 12 participants, volunteers from across Ireland, different universities, from the Young Voices project, to represent a wide geographic spread, but also to represent different backgrounds. And we invited them, we gave them training, and we basically said, we had the thought of a plenary, but we want you to decide what topics are important to you, what matters to you, which speakers you want, which politicians you want to address, because it is your future that you're discussing here. And they were great. They were very engaged. They decided on who they wanted to talk to, which topics they wanted to talk to, and they broadened our horizon in a sense as well, because we very much work with the Department for Communications, Climate Action and Environment. But they said, no, we actually also really want to hear, to speak to politicians from the Department of Agriculture, because agriculture is such a massive thing regarding climate action in Ireland and the bioeconomy. They also said we want to talk to local councillors, because the just transition that is needed for climate action includes housing and includes transport, and local councillors are the ones that we want to talk to this about. They also said we want to bring this to the European level. We want to invite members of the European Parliament to have discussions around the European Green Deal, but also around maybe more critical concepts such as degrowth instead of economic growth, and also decided that they actually wanted to invite the university representatives, so the administration in universities, because they felt that in their environment, in the university environment that a lot of them were in, it wasn't very spoken about, and it wasn't as integrated as they would like to see it. So they thought that would be a level of policy that they could also attack, in a sense, target through the policy dialogue. They also set the format. They decided there would be a big plenary, there would be breakout groups, but they also wanted a podcast on the side to reach other audience. They also wanted video so they can target it on social media to their audience, because they know the audience that young people are most interested in and the channels that they will follow. And they also decided in the end that, yeah, we want a good chunk of people. We want around 80 young people here, and they were tasked with recruiting them from their network, and they have been very successful already. We have over 80 people that would be interested in, young people that would be interested in taking part, and around 20 policymakers that had already confirmed for our event in March. Now, obviously that didn't go ahead, so we're hoping that we can either postpone the event entirely, do it in person with social distancing. If that doesn't work, we'll have to move it online, which probably will be just as successful, but slightly less personal. But that's just the current situation. So I know that there's space for questions afterwards, but if you have any questions, feel free to send me an email. I'm available at research@rediscoverycentre.ie, and also feel free to have a look at our website if you have any questions about the work we do.
Thank you so much, Laura. And it's so wonderful to see both Laura and Aideen's experiences of really connecting their projects to policy under different programs, so under both the European Solidarity Corps and Erasmus+. So I hope that people are getting lots of ideas and feeling inspired after their presentations. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into breakout rooms, and both myself and Suzanne, and also Nolene, our colleague, is here from Lergas, and Deirdre. We're going to be moving around through the breakout rooms to kind of help you facilitate the discussion a little bit. We'll be moving from room to room. And we would like you to now look at considering kind of two questions. The first is, do you think, from what you've heard this morning, that there might be opportunities for your organizations under these EU programs? So just to discuss that amongst yourselves. And then we would like everyone, because we have a lot of people here, we would like every group just to think of one burning question that you would like to put back to either us from Lergas or from the Wheel, or also to our project beneficiaries that you heard this morning, Aideen and Laura, who will be staying around to answer any questions that you have. So when we come back from the breakout rooms, your burning question, if you just put that into the chat box, and then we'll direct it to the right person, and we can have a little bit of a Q&A then. And then we'll also talk a little bit to you guys about next steps and how you can kind of further your knowledge about the programs and how you can connect with us after today. So happy discussing, and I'll see you in one of the breakout rooms shortly.
We still have approximately 60 people on the call, so it's quite a big group, and Sinead divided you into groups of 8 or so, and give or take there were between 5 and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people in each group. At this point now, the burning question, well, Kim is straight in with her first question, so please, I'd ask you to type your one burning question for your room into the chat box, and I'm going to field those either to myself or to Suzanne and Pia, and maybe also our case study, so Laura and Aideen may wish to offer insights too. So I'm just going to get going then with Kim's question from room 9. Can you be matched with an EU partner, or do you source your own? Suzanne, do you want to, you put your hand up for that, did you?
Oh, no, sorry, did I? No, I think Pia was going to answer. Pia.
Oh, Pia, do you want to take that? Yeah.
Well, I can speak to the Erasmus Plus program anyway, and then Susanna and Noli might have something to add on the Solidarity Corps. So under the Erasmus Plus program, we don't match people with each other as such, but what we do have in place, and actually we didn't cover this in the presentation, so apologies for that, but part of the Erasmus Plus program involves something called transnational cooperation activities, which sounds worse than it is. Essentially what they are trainings. And the trainings happen in all of the different fields that we work in. and lots of different thematic areas. So the way they work is that a number of these trainings are hosted by Lergas every year, but they're also hosted by other national agencies across Europe. And we would support people to attend those trainings. So all of the trainings that we support are listed on our website. So you can go to the field that you're interested in, and then you can see the upcoming trainings on that. And if you're interested in attending one, so you don't have to be involved in the program to attend. If you're interested, what you do is you send us an application form. They're very straightforward. It's basically just outlining why you're interested in attending and how you think it will benefit your work. And then if you're selected to attend, usually it's a €60 participation fee, and then we would cover the rest. So we would cover your travel, your accommodation, and so forth. So obviously with COVID, things have been stalled a little bit, but the trainings are starting to kind of be started up again in a number of different countries, and also some of them are taking place online. So I would really encourage people to look into those opportunities, because it's a really good way of meeting organizations in other countries that are interested in the different or in the same area as you are. And it's also a brilliant way of finding partners. And then just to say as well, on the youth side of things, there is actually a partner finding website called Otlas, OTLAS. And you can go on that website and you can select, or you can look for partners according to different thematic areas. So that might also be of interest to you. But if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to get in contact with me afterwards.
Yeah,
Dan or Noel, you might have something to add.
No, I think it's exactly the same way. And anything else we can go through if you were interested. But it's the same process for the Solidarity Corps.
Okay, great. I know for Europe for Citizens, we have we would encourage people to fill out a partner search form, send it to me, and I can share it amongst my counterparts around the EU, so all the other member states have a contact point. And we also have a specific website for partner search, and we can send that on to you in the follow-up notes to this event today if you wish to find that. I'm going to move on, okay, to the next burning question. Are there supports, for this one question from Room 4, are there supports with front-loaded funding, as retrospective funding is difficult for small organisations with little cash flow? So under Europe for Citizens programme, you will only be given 50% of the project funding in the first as you get going, so you would need to have your own cash flow and you won't get the second half of funding until after your final report is submitted. So we wouldn't advise entering into Europe for Citizens certainly without some cash flow ability. There are other programs such as the Arts Council now has a fund that provides core funding or match funding into Creative Europe. So there is some place for that, but in my program certainly not. And if you want to take that, Suzanne or Pia, for you guys.
So for the Solidarity Corps, it's the same. They give you it's stage payments, so it's like 70% or 30% or 60 and 40. So it's the same. And the start dates for the project then are usually about 3 months after the application. So that's when you can start spending money.
And if I may just make a comment there with the European Solidarity Corps and indeed EVS, if you have a bigger project, which is more than 60,000, then it's divided into 3 tranches. But the second tranche comes quite quickly after the first. So once you get started, it's not so bad. That's what we found anyway. Thank you.
And just to add, from the Erasmus Plus side of things, it will be the same. So usually it's 70% of the funding once your project has been selected, and 30% once you have submitted your final report at the end of the project.
Okay.
But just to say as well, sorry, I know that some people who might have had experience with European projects, sometimes there is an expectation or a requirement from on people to co-fund. That doesn't exist under Erasmus Plus. Now, we wouldn't say that we 100% fund projects, because you might incur costs that aren't covered by the budget that's awarded to you, but there's no expectation on beneficiaries to match fund their program. So in that way, the Erasmus Plus program would differ a little bit from other European programs that you might have come across, where there's a specific requirement to say match fund 20% or whatever of your overall project cost.
Okay.
Having said that, it would be very difficult to completely do a project on, just relying on the Erasmus Plus funding. Without a doubt, you do need to have a backup of other kinds of funding for core costs like office. But the funding is actually very generous, I think, and we're certainly very happy with it. But we don't have the accommodation problems that they have in Dublin, and I think that is a huge problem when it comes to hosting volunteers. And certainly we have heard quite a lot of feedback about that from other organizations who would like to host volunteers but just can't because they can't accommodate them.
Okay, I think that's Aideen. I think that point also carries to, oh, am I muted? Which also carries to projects where you need to accommodate people for partner meetings.
Yes.
If they travel to our country, we're not volunteers necessarily, but that means they're going to be hosted perhaps in a Dublin city centre hotel. It's just not going to happen under Europe for Citizens funding. So there are many creative ways that people overcome this in terms of, much cheaper accommodation or house sharing or actually being based in Bray or going to places like that. So I think it's a really good point. Yeah, rather than we mustn't ignore that fact. In Europe for Citizens, for certain, it can be expensive. I'm going to move on to the next question, if that's okay. What is the quality label and how do you achieve it? This is for you, Suzanne.
Yeah, so the quality label is your entry ticket into the program. So basically it's an application form, and it is it's there to assess your motivation to come into the program. So that makes sure that your mission and your principles align with the program. So to make sure that you are involved in what we call solidarity related activities. So these are activities based in the community, addressing a need in the community, and that you are going to provide the right conditions to support a young person. So you'd have the right accommodation and all that kind of stuff, but also and logistics, but also kind of mentoring, supervising, and supporting their learning and their personal development. So it's an application form, but you apply to us directly into the NA National Agency, and we assess it, and we would go out and visit and all that kind of stuff. So, yep.
Okay, great. And Suzanne, you in your slides, the signposting there in terms of how the quality label is the first step on the journey. There's a question again from yourself, Aideen. Can we get more focus on organisations that are exploring joining the Erasmus family through structure of the organisations and achieving? Can you explain a little bit what you mean by that question? How do you?
I was just thinking as I was writing it, I wasn't really expressing it very well. No, by coincidence, we had two organisations in our breakout room that would like to get engaged, but weren't at the stage of their own development as organisations. Now it's a bit outside the scope of Erasmus Plus, but maybe within the scope of Wheel. To give support to these organisations, and there must be more of them out there who would like to get involved but are not at the stage maybe of having a constitution or something like that, just to handhold them through, if they know exactly what they need. I think that would be a great help, and maybe the Wheel could fill that gap.
Yeah, that's I understand your question actually, and I speak to a lot of organisations, Aideen, that are perhaps they're in terms of their legal entity and how they're established. Yes. They're not yet fully eligible for certain types of EU funding. So under certain programs, it's essential that you're a legal entity, that you have your governance in place, and that you have a bank account. Certain steps you would already need to be advanced. So I would recommend people to visit wheel.ie and wheel.ie/governance for anything around establishing a charity, getting an organisation set up. And also my colleague Mairead O'Connor is our advisor in that area. So yes, we are certainly here to help for non-members and members together.
Yeah, I wonder if I could ask Suzanne to clarify that. Do you actually have to be a registered charity to get Erasmus Plus funding?
No, I'm not. So for the European Solidarity Corps, you have to be a legal entity. Yeah.
Which means just a constitution and having a bank account, I think, isn't it?
I'm actually
and
not
proper auditing.
I'm not. I'm not fully sure because
there's I know.
In the,
see,
in
this
the
is
thing.
it.
So,
yeah, I think that.
And so, what I'd say to you is, if anybody does have a question, whether they meet the criteria, they're eligible, contact us and we can
and find out.
Work that out. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to move on a little bit. So question from room 6, how does an applicant plan to match their project with policy? Should it be one piece or multiple pieces? And how does a lead partner delegate financial management of the project? So there's really 2 questions there. The policy question, Pia, what do you think?
Yeah, I might actually just answer the second part of the question first around the financial management. So if you are the lead partner, that means whoever is the lead partner is the one who applies to their national agency. So if anybody in the room here today, you know, is thinking, okay, I'd like to be a lead partner for an Erasmus Plus project, then you're the ones who would fill in the application. Obviously, together with your partners, they would feed into that, but you would be the one who holds ultimate responsibility for that. And you would also be the ones who manage the finances of the project. There are lots of organisations in Ireland that are involved in Erasmus Plus projects as partners through other national agencies and other organisations. So maybe where an organisation in Spain is taking the lead and you're simply partnering on it, and they would then have the financial responsibility for the project. So if you are a lead, then you have that responsibility, and you also would be the ones, you know, submitting the final reports and so on. So I hope that clarifies things a little bit. But if people have more kind of in-depth questions about finances, we also have an operations and finance team in Lergus. So anything that's kind of in more detail, please feel free to drop any of us an email, and we can put you in contact with the right person as well. In terms of the question around policy, I suppose, I mean, there's no set expectation of how people engage with policy, and I think it really varies both on your project and I suppose where you as an organization are working at. So, you know, you might be working at a very local level, or you might be working at a more national level. So I think what we like to, or what we're encouraging people to reflect in their applications is just, sometimes it's just an awareness even of the types of policies that are out there that are applicable to your work, and being able to reflect that in your application. You know, we're not expecting, now some people might be ready for that, but we're certainly not expecting an application that really, like, you know, that very deeply delves into policy if that's not something that you're ready for. So I think it's really just depending on what level you're at and what kind of work you do, it's really just showing an awareness and being able to reflect a little bit on maybe the local or the national or the European policies that exist. And I hope my presentation earlier kind of showed that, you know, the youth work example that I gave, that, you know, if you're working on a certain thematic area, just to be aware that there are policies probably out there that link with that, and to be able to show that in your application. So there's no, I don't think there's any set answer for that. It really depends on where you're at and what your project would look like. But again, happy to answer any more questions on that later. And I know that some of us are also happy to hang around for an extra couple of minutes after this workshop ends, just if anybody else has any questions. So thanks for that.
Yeah, great, thank you. Now, room 6 also had a question: how do you apply, and how do you fit the policy with the program plan? So again, I think to echo your point, Pia, you know, the program guide and the program priorities are supposed to spark and inspire and stimulate interest from NGOs like ours or organisations, but the Commission want us to be the ones coming up with the ideas. They do not want to be prescriptive in that regard. So fitting in with policy, again, I think you've answered that already, Pia, quite well. Yeah. Then how to apply. Well, after this question and answer session, we're going to put some signposting up on the next steps. All 3 of us do training and application clinics on how to do forms. I have done 2 already in June. So Suzanne, did you want to just make a comment on how to apply for European Solidarity course a little bit different?
Well, I suppose, yeah, you apply first for your quality label, obviously, to get into the programme. So just because you have the quality label doesn't mean you have funding. We have 3 deadlines in the year, so February, April and October. And you apply then using an online application form. But like Dee says, we go through that journey with you before you get there. We make sure that you put as much training on as possible, so that you can have as much support then to be able to fill in the application form.
Okay. Burning question from room 10. Is there a one-stop shop for all European funding? I'm working on it. That's something in my wish list. Barriers to, or I suppose, overcome barriers to access. This can be a big problem regardless of funding streams when working with very marginalised groups. So I'm just going to quickly direct you all to a hyperlink, which is wheel.ie/EU. So I have got pages there on the Wheels website, and it covers things like case studies of your organisations funded through the European Union, how to access EU funds, and also who are the national contact points. So I'm just going to put that into my chat room here. If anyone wants to add anything to that, please go ahead.
I just, oh, sorry.
I was just going to add from our point of view, we actually, so one of the big priorities under the Erasmus Plus program and also Solidarity is inclusion. So we work very hard to support organizations who are working with marginalized groups to be able to access the programs that we manage. So we actually have a dedicated inclusion officer in Lergas who supports organizations to be able to become involved in the program. And, you know, we know that, you know, some organizations need more support than others and are less familiar with these kinds of processes. So that person, Anne Malloy is her name, she's our inclusion officer. So she works specifically with organizations that you're referring to there, or with marginalized groups. We also connect in with the National Youth Council of Ireland quite a lot in terms of the inclusion work that they're doing. So there are lots of supports available. Unfortunately, I don't think there's a one-stop shop, but as you just said, we're working on it. But yeah, please, again, you know, don't feel like please don't feel like there are too many barriers, because we're really here to support you to overcome any barriers that there are. And sometimes it's also a case of, you know, maybe starting small, you know, not going for a massive project straight away. There's lots of ways that you can become involved, I think, in a small way maybe, and then to build your experience and move on to a bigger project. And we've seen that a lot as well with organizations. Yeah, it's really good advice. Also, just to let everyone on the call know that the Department of Foreign Affairs did put out a tender call this year that would create a kind of a one-stop shop national contact point for civil society organizations to get information on EU funding. So let's see what happens with that. Might be launched next year, but essentially the government does know that more accessible and I suppose demystified information is required for our sector. So that hopefully will be a great boon for us in the future. Let's see what happens there. So room 5, the same question as room 9. Okay, great. And I just want to, there is a huge challenge to digitize in a post-COVID environment. Yeah. How can a small NGO tap into funding streams? Describe to create a job for a young person to work in technical support in rolling out our outputs and re-digitizing costs in general and funding for volunteers. I might try and field this one to you, Suzanne. I don't know if there's, this could potentially be a job for a European Solidarity Corps volunteer, or?
Yeah, like we have had organisations actually apply to us for digitalising their information or work or whatever, especially if they're very kind of small, or if they've got a lot of research that they've done that hasn't, and they haven't moved that into that kind of sphere. So they've put that as part of their project. But I think in terms of COVID, it's something that we're kind of learning as we go and hearing from the Commission what is available and what is allowable, I suppose, you know, and it's really difficult because one of the great things is about our program is that it's so flexible, and that we do have a lot of flexibility in it, and so then we don't always have the black and white answer because of that. So it really just depends on how you approach that and what it looks like in terms of your project, in terms of how that impacts the community and the need that you're addressing at community level. So I don't want to not answer, because, like, you know, it's not black and white, but it's really about your project, and it's really about, we fund the project, not the work that you're doing. We fund the project, and so there's a subtle, but there is a difference, if that makes sense.
Mm. Yeah, that's a really good point. It generally is project funding as opposed to organizational funding. So Flora from Culture Connect, hi Flora. You're talking about how can migrant-led organizations be supported to take advantage of these opportunities. Well, I know Europe for Citizens actually is coming from the area of migration. It's under DG Home and Migration and within the European Commission. So it's certainly how we can help you is just myself as the national contact point, and the wheel can advise you. I do think though that Lergas also can advise you quite well in terms of what you mentioned about Anne, the inclusion officer, Pia, and just supporting organisations to reach into all communities.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned before, we do have that dedicated inclusion support. Migration and addressing issues around migration is also another priority area under the Erasmus Plus program. So I guess in terms of you know, how you can be supported to take advantage of the opportunities, I think my advice to you would probably be the same as most other organizations. You know, come to one of our workshops where you can kind of explore ideas, and we'll put this up, the kind of journey that we bring people on through the Erasmus Plus and through the Solidarity Corps programs. We'll put this up after our conversation, but you know, sometimes we would start with kind of with Discovery Day, where you can really just, you know, discover the programs in more detail, look at the different options that are there, discuss different kind of interests that you have, and then we lead you right through to an application clinic where we provide you with the support that you need to fill out the application form. So there's lots of support available, but obviously if you need specific support in terms of inclusion, then we can certainly put you in contact with the right person as well. And we have lots of migrant organizations that are involved in the programs. So it's definitely something I think, you know, that would be worth looking into. And again, happy to answer any more specific questions after this, or if you want to pop any of us an email. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, that's really, really useful. It's great to see you again, Flora. I know you've been interested in this area for quite a while. And Aga has a great question. It's just, again, can you put yourself forward for partnership rather than being a lead? Absolutely. And, you know, this is in fact recommended practice would often be to join certain types of transnational projects, which means projects that go across a number of countries. Being a partner at first, you learn so much. You don't necessarily have to take as much heavy lifting, and you will suddenly find yourself part of a network with new contacts and new ideas and skills shared from around other member states. It's just excellent. I am happy to share with you, Aga, some webinar information, a webinar recording on partnership development, and also a way you can try and find partners to join Europe for Citizens. We can talk separately on that. Do you guys want to I think it's the same really, Pia and Suzanne. Yeah, okay. That's great. The next one now, I'm just going to try and go downwards. Hang on a second. We're kind of coming to an end now because it's come past 11:30. Is the EU resource with the wheel available for non-members? Well, Martin, the website there, wheel.ie/EU, absolutely. That's public information for you to enjoy. Members of the wheel, I have calls with them, one-to-ones. I'm more than happy to help you. We're here to help our members and also the wider sector to be in it together, so to speak. And just Suzanne, a question there about young people in direct provision being eligible.
Yeah, so if you're a legal resident in the country that you're in, then you can participate in the Solidarity Corps. And one of the things, I suppose, just I don't have the chat open, sorry, so I can't. But one of the things that you might be interested in is the Solidarity projects. So please come and find out about those. They're really interesting. They don't involve travel, so that can be like a way of entering into the program and into this idea of European programs for young people who may then experience issues of travel and stuff like that. So these are in-country projects. So please come back to me and contact me about that.
Okay. Partnership information. I think people are asking me about partnership information both privately and publicly here, so I'll put some links to partner ideas. We're going to be sending all these slides to you afterwards, and we can add some hyperlinks in there too for follow-up. What we might do at this point is we've got some kind of signposting information to send to put up now. So will I go ahead and do that, guys? And then we're just going to, I think we're going to take it from there. Thank you for all of your excellent questions. I think we probably can't do every single one, but we've gotten to most of them. I'm screen sharing. I hope everyone can see it. And I'm on next steps. There we go. So I think it was it for me to do this? I can just go ahead. So what we would say to people interested in European funded programs, you need to explore them first and really inform yourself. And that's what the wheel Lergas, and there are certain documentation such as program guides are for. We also would like you to keep informed, and that means speaking to both ourselves and the staff from the organisation, but also other beneficiaries. And we've learned that today from Laura and Aidine's input, how valuable it is to hear real life experiences. There are training opportunities, so many. So I, for example, am doing a training in 2 weeks' time, and please take a look at the relevant websites. Connect with us at staff at our events. And I know that Lergas are doing webinar Wednesdays. Do you want to mention these events that you do here, Suzanne? Do you want to jump in here? This is your...
Yeah, actually, I was just going to say, maybe if you want to go on, if you want to finish that and go on to the next slide, I can just talk about the events.
Okay.
Yes, so these are the 5 steps into each program that we talk about in terms of Erasmus Plus and the European Solidarity Corps. So I was talking to one of the groups earlier on. So what we do is we take a high support approach. So what we want is we want good quality applications. We want young people to be able to have their volunteer experience. So what we do is we run a discovery day, and that is where you will find out a little bit more of information than today. But start to think about, okay, this actually does sound really familiar to what I'm doing, but it's going to add the impact or whatever. Then if you have the nugget or the seed of an idea, then you go to a project lab, and that's where we germinate your idea. And we're running one of these in August. And so it's a full day event, but in August it'll be obviously online, so it'll be over 3 weeks, an hour each. And that is really where you start to actually, exactly like that, look at the relevance, look at the needs, look at the policy, and then how you're going to implement it, how you're going to manage it, what partners, how do I get my partners, and then who do I tell my story to. Dissemination is a big part of our program, so telling your story of the impact, because that's what it's all about. You then would attend an application clinic, so that's exactly what you were talking about, G, where we go to the application form, we help you look at what the points are, where they are, what is it that we're looking for at the evaluation stage. And finally then we have an open house then about a week before the actual deadline. We have a space for you to make an appointment with any one of us, be it from the ops and finance team then to the quality team, and to finalize your project and to kind of make sure that you're happy with it. If you have any issues, you bring that to us, and then you then submit it online then. So it's a very high support approach that we take with organizations. Yeah, so oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. I think the website for you though is europeansolidarity.ie. Is that correct, Suzanne? Okay, and we've got lergas.ie, europeforcitizens.ie, wheel.ie/EU. And there are so many opportunities. We're literally just skimming the surface. So at this point, I'd like to say thank you. Sinead, you can probably unmute everybody. Thank you, as always, to Suzanne, Pia and Nolene from Lergas for being such great colleagues and helping us put together the virtual summit event today. And thank you to all our participants.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.